Hey guys, it's Ricci here. Just wanted to thank you guys for all the support so far. Just want to give you a heads up for this week's episode. Erica's mic was having some technical issues, so you'll hear some static throughout the episode when she's speaking. So just want to apologize in advance. Hope you guys like this week's episode. We are very happy to be back in Canada to experience our first Grand Prix, and there's a lot to talk about. So enough of me talking. Let's get right into the episode. Thanks, everyone.
Max Verstappen can just start to relax and to rest a little bit as for the first time he starts a race in Montreal on pole, and for the first time he sees the checkered flag and will know what it's like to win the Canadian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen comes home in first place. Carlos Sainz pushed him all the way and takes a second place in his career, and it's Lewis Hamilton back on the podium once more for Mercedes in third.
What's up, everyone? It is Ricci here from the F1 Podcast, Season 2, Episode 12. A week after the Canadian Grand Prix, which some of us had the pleasure of going to. Man, there's a lot to talk about here. But before I talk anymore, let's just introduce our other co-hosts. We have Andrew and Erica. Hey, guys, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Excellent. And, guys, our first guest, special guest, the Tyler Hatherell, aka Red Bull's #1 fan. Tyler, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Excited to join you guys.
And for those that don't know Tyler is a big Red Bull fan. He became in actually why am I talking? Tyler, do you have any, Tyler, go right ahead. Tell us about your F1 journey. What brought you to literally the last weekend where I met you? No, I'm kidding, but
yeah, that's even a longer story. But yeah, I guess I got into F1 through you, John. So you kind of gave me the intro into the sport, and then obviously got caught up in the Drive to Survive fandom like everybody else seems to over the last few years, and just got really into the sport at the end of 2020, I would say. And then my first full season sort of was last year as a Red Bull fan. And that was obviously a crazy, wild ride as a Max Verstappen fan, especially. So yeah, that kind of just cemented my love for the sport. And next thing you know, I'm spending 6 days in Montreal going to the race, and, I'm sure we'll get into it, but it was an amazing time. And yeah, I've become a huge diehard F1 fan. So happy to be joining you guys.
and we really appreciate you obviously coming on the pod. So we obviously have a lot to talk about. And I think, Andrew, you kind of wanted to circulate this since you were the only guy that couldn't be there.
Yeah.
So, but before you start, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and I've also been streaming on Twitch. I was playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles earlier this week. But go ahead, Andrew. You wanted to set this one up.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was not unable to attend the Canadian Grand Prix, but luckily enough, we had the sponsorship dollars necessary to get Jonathan and Erica out to be our leads in the field, and Tyler was able to join them too. So, this was the first time we had a race in Canada since 2019, and especially with us being really new to the sport, it would be a new journey for everybody, I would say, being your first time attending. So I just kind of want to go around and see what was like, describe your whole journey. What was unexpected? What did you wish you did more of there as a whole? So I'll start with John.
So I think one of the big things that I learned is, I went with my dad, and I think that was a pretty good Father's Day weekend, especially, and someone he's been to a race before in San Marino where he saw Schumacher race. The minute we touched down in Montreal, just the atmosphere around the city, mind you, there were checkered flags outside every hotel. The city was buzzing. They've not had a race in 3 years. Heck, even I'll do photos throughout the YouTube video of this, but fire trucks had checkered flags on the back of their trucks driving across either Saint Laurent or some of the major streets in Montreal. And, I was a little nervous, going to the track the first day on Friday is okay. Like, what time do we have to go at? And like, we were nervous of navigating because I've never navigated the Montreal subway. But it was so easy. Just follow all the fans, and they took you to the circuit, and everyone was just so friendly. No matter what team you supported, whether it was Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, list goes down, et cetera, et cetera. everyone was just happy that Formula One was back in Canada. And the stat, I just checked, 338,000 fans attended that weekend. And they had the pit lane walk, I think it was on the Thursday, sold out immediately. Or it was like within an hour, they had to cut it off because of how much demand it was. And everybody were in the seats were packed for FP1, FP2, FP3, nobody missed out. Like, it was crazy on just how much people were excited. I do it again in a heartbeat. There's no question. But Erica, what about you? What did you think?
My gosh, it was a wild weekend. Like, for me, I've flown through the Montreal airport, I mean, over a dozen times now, but I've never actually been in the city before. So like you said, it was kind of wild to actually be there and experience it. And on the way home on Monday, we stopped near like Dorval, like outside the city, because it was just still so hectic downtown. And that was people talking about like they've not seen it that busy in so long. Like, everyone thinks that Osheaga, like the music festivals, the Montreal Blues Festival and jazz and stuff are like the big times to go, but it's F1. F1 is the biggest weekend that's there, and it was insane, but in a very fun way. I very much like I was killing myself laughing like on Friday for FP1. It's not even the craziest racing you're going to see because the drivers are trying to figure out the track, and both Ricci, Tyler and I were all fortunate enough to be down by the hairpin turn. So we saw some really great stuff happening. And even during practice, you know, the number of people who were kind of overshooting it into the turn and having to kind of, you know, go off the track in order to peel back and, you know, understand the circuit a little bit better was pretty entertaining. And I'm sitting there, it's not even the race, nothing all that exciting's happened. It doesn't matter for points. And I'm sitting there like clasping my hands like, oh my gosh, I'm here. This is so fun.
100%.
And like, I loved it. I wish I got a little bit more of a chance to kind of explore everything that was going on, because I know F1 really is trying to make these races an experience, right? So there's like a fan zone where you can go and do a ton of stuff. They've got sims you can sign up for, the pit stop challenge. They've got some sims that are even specifically for women, because they're really trying to encourage women and young girls to get into racing, which was cool. So would have been nice to know about that ahead of time so I could sign up and participate, or go see Alesso at the end, because we had like no idea Alesso was playing, which is like huge DJ to be in Montreal for something like this. That was wild. But that was insane. So like, we're walking the track at the end of the race, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's like, it's already happening. Like, I thought it would be more time until closing and the DJ is starting to play, but no. But it was a blast. Like, had such a great time. Like Ricci said, I would go back in a heartbeat. Already was looking up to see if there were still tickets for sale for any other races this season, but on the F1 website, if you want to buy like directly from them, it's only Paddock Club and stuff, which, as much as I'd love to have the budget for that, and I'm sure I could pony up the money. I don't know about you guys, but I don't have 5,000 euros at my disposal to spend on a whim. So it'll be looking toward next year and the next season, but very much keen to be there for another race, see some more exciting overtakes and such wherever it is that I'm posted up, and have a good time in Montreal or elsewhere.
What was your experience like, Tyler?
Honestly, mine was, you know, along the same lines of the things that you both covered, to be honest. I think the one thing that stood out to me more than anything was just the atmosphere. It was unparalleled, unbelievable. There was so much going on, not only at the track, but just the city in general was a buzz for F1. And it was a lot of very passionate, knowledgeable F1 fans, and just being in that atmosphere and getting to share that, you know, passion with everybody else was really special. And then just kind of the diversity of the fans that you got to interact with there as well. Like, we were sitting in the Lance Stroll section, and the people behind us were from Texas. There were people to my right who had flown in from Europe. Like, it just shows, you know, how much of a global sport Formula One really is. And that was really cool to see. And then just a sea of different teams that were, you know, being supported throughout the whole weekend. It was a lot of Red Bull, a lot of Ferrari, and that was shown through the flags that lined basically every grandstand. Was Ferrari flags everywhere. A lot of Mercedes fans, of course, but then, you know, sprinkled in the, you know, papaya hats. The McLaren stood out everywhere. It felt like a lot of Aston Martin fans for Stroll and Seb. So just seeing just the variety of fans that turned up to the event, it made all the difference. And then just, you know, even as Ricci touched on in the top there, the grandstands were full for every session. FP1, FP2, FP3 in the rain. So a pouring down rain practice session, and the grandstands were packed, completely packed for a practice session that ultimately didn't matter in the wet. So to see that was, unbelievable. The atmosphere was unparalleled. It was an amazing experience, and I can't wait to go back again. 100% I'll be going to another one.
Also, I just want to say special shout out to Tyler for stepping up and doing an Instagram video while we were watching. We were stuck in the rain because there was nothing to do. And with our really $5 umbrellas, really appreciate you stepping up for the Instagram. And shout out to all the fans that follow us that weekend. We hit over 100.
Woo.
I think it was at least like 100% jump in supporters this weekend. So I just need to make note of that. And actually, one of the also things I wanted to note is all the old retro. I don't know if you guys saw this, all the old retro shirts that you saw the weekend, whether if it was the Renault shirts of Fernando Alonso when he won in, I think it was 05, 06, or whether if it was, I saw a lot
McLaren,
of, yeah,
McLaren Mercedes gear stuff from when they were still teamed up.
Lotus.
The pink Racing Point too always stood out. There's a lot of Racing Points, surprisingly.
So that was
Lots of Racing Point, yeah.
I guess it kind of goes into my next question in the sense of like, ever since like F1 got bought out, or I guess bought out by Liberty Media, there's been like a big thing about connecting fans to the sport and going to go. That's how you're able to do with DTS, and that's how they've been able to do with the social media online. I guess in a sense, over your 6 days there, how much did you feel you're able to connect with the drivers and with media members and people within the overall paddock at these types of races, because it's quite open? Yeah, John, go ahead.
So I'll start here. I want to just give a special shout out to the F1 photographer, Kim Illman. He was actually taking photos in our grandstand, and I just kind of turned around. I'm like, wait a minute, I think I know who that is. So shout out to Kim for taking a photo with me afterwards. But, a lot of the drivers were staying at the Ritz-Carlton. So a couple of us tried to wait it outside to see if we can get a photo with them. But a lot of them were really friendly for what I was told. Despite like some of them had a lot of security, but my friend was able to get pictures with 5 drivers. I missed Carlos Sainz by 5 minutes. I was like running up the street to get to the Ritz, and all I hear is screaming and yelling, and I was like, I missed it. But I saw Nicholas Latifi's parents, figured out who those people were. Yeah. Some car drew up, and I noticed they have a tag that allows them. For people that know, I'll post on the YouTube video, as I said, but there's a tag that allows which cars can go into the actual Grand Prix, like the actual circuit, to park if they're VIP or whatever. And I kind of, when we saw this car parked up at the Ritz, I was like, who are these people? Because I had no idea who they were. Next thing you know, when Kim Illman posted a video, and he's like, oh, that's Nicholas Latifi's parents. I was like, wow, okay. Put 2 to 2 together. So I think it's
Fine Foods royalty right there.
It was good, but I did hear some negative stuff. I think it was on the Sunday, or when they were doing the fan meetup for autographs. Only 400 people were given bracelets, and people were waiting hours in the rain it was on the Saturday. So hopefully next year, I think there are some lessons learned for this weekend. That, whether if it's traffic control or more chances to meet some of the drivers, but also it's a huge demand. So hopefully, it was a great weekend overall, but there's some things that they can fix, more water stations, but that's my opinion. So we don't have to dwell in the negativities.
Yeah, I struggled with that one with the drivers for a little bit, because as much as it's great to have that fan experience and have them involved in, promoting the sport and stuff, at the same time, like, that's not really the bulk of their job, right? And especially when the weather's trash and you're going to need a little bit more time to plan ahead of a Q3 and a qualifying FQ3, not Q3, and a qualifying session. I mean, you really do want to make the most of every minute that you have. So it definitely sucks, but at the same time, like you said, Ricci, I mean, a lot of them weren't actually waiting and didn't get to meet the drivers. It was like you got this wristband and then you got to come back and collect your signed token or whatever it was that you had, and there's their way to make that more accessible for sure. But I think part of it too, I mean, there was one guy who was ahead of me in line when we were coming into the park on Saturday, And he talked about how long he waited after FP2 on Friday in order to meet Leclerc, because he's a huge Ferrari fan, like raised supporting the team. This was the first Grand Prix he's ever been to, was going to do whatever he could. And he had to wait 4 hours after FP2 in order to meet Charles after the session, because he had to go meet with the stewards, you know, talk about the penalty he was going to take with some of the changes to his engine. And I'm like, that's insane. And I mean, these are all people who are waiting at the exit. It's not like a syndicated event or anything of that sort, but just kind of wild, honestly, that's
Like you're
I mean,
just
the weather was like the weather was trash at that point. It started raining after FP2 when everyone was on their way back to the metro to like go back to their hotels and stuff. But like, honestly, I mean, it was kind of wild. Like, as much as I would have liked to have waited, like I think a lot of people would have, because for me that's a big part of why I was there. But the group I was with, you know, some people wanted to wait, others didn't. It's just insane, the kind of lineup. And like you said, 338,000 people. Like, if everyone wanted to go through that, like how on earth could you organize it so everyone had the experience they wanted, right? But so fun. And like, I don't even know if I have the words to explain it. Like, I still feel like I'm coming down. It's been like a week since we all left, and I'm like, oh my God, I still need time to like get myself in order. So
Yeah, it's kind of a tough spot they're in, right? Because the way the island is kind of mapped out, obviously they built it for the Olympics when it was there in the 70s. And so it's not really meant to be like a permanent circuit, even though obviously it's there all year round. But when F1's not there, it's a park, right? It's just an open park. They take down the grandstands, which are all temporary, and, you know, all the fencing and all that kind of stuff. So it is difficult to imagine like what more they can do to alleviate some of the congestion, because it was pretty tough to get around just the track. Like, one of the things I wish we could have done a little bit more was actually explore the circuit a little bit more outside of doing the track walk. But trying to get from the
it
metro
was too jammed.
to your own
Yeah.
seats to start the race was tough enough as it is, right, for any session. So, you know, there was no shot you're going to be able to walk down and go check out, you know, like the Heineken. They had like that terrace where there was like drinks, and Alesso was playing there and stuff like that. Like, even trying to navigate to some of those areas was going to be impossible, because there was not a lot of room to move around outside the grandstands, right? So I wonder what kind of creative solutions they can kind of explore to fix that. But like, having said that, it's a man-made island. There's not a lot of space because they're surrounded by water, so you can't push out any of the, you know, patron sort of areas any more than they already are. But that was one thing that was a bit of a struggle. But I think, considering that, and considering the fact they hadn't put on the event in 3 years, it was pretty seamless, and I think they did a pretty good job, especially with the metro, considering how busy it was after some of the sessions. Just getting people out was pretty solid, all things considered. But yeah, that's going to happen when you have 340,000 people going crazy for F1 who want to see the event. So it was pretty cool.
well, it was interesting. Like, a couple of my friends went to Austin this past fall, and so like you said, like there's only so much you can do when you're on this little man-made island, right? And so since Austin, the race is actually like a decent ways away from the city and everything, so they have the space. You could walk around the whole track. You couldn't do that in Montreal, because in order to have the access routes and everything, they had to block it off, so you couldn't walk like 360 degrees all the way around. And that's it. It's like you have a trade-off. Like, either you're in the middle of the metropolis where it's super easy to get to and everyone can kind of come and go as they please, or you have to do what like Silverstone does and Austin and some of these other circuits where you're way outside. Everyone's got these shuttles. Takes forever to get to and from. It's not all that convenient, right? So 6 and 1. The one thing I will say that was super funny was I was all excited on Sunday because I found a Canadian Grand Prix hat finally. But it wasn't until after I paid that I realized it said 2020 on it. And I don't know if any of you have paid attention to calendars, but it's 2022. So I bought myself and my dad a hat, and I was like, so I have to buy you something else for Father's Day also, because this hat says 2020. And
Was that $80 or?
No, it was like $20, but I was like, cool,
Okay,
a hat that's
okay,
$20.
That's funny.
So that's where I'm at. So if anyone sees me wearing a 2020 Canadian Grand Prix hat, just know that one of the skills on my resume is not attention to detail. So,
But in a way, you may have like one of like the only ones in circulation for a Grand Prix that didn't run quite a
Yeah,
bit.
you could
quite a
fool
bit
a
of
lot
history
of
there.
people. You could
I
say,
like
"Oh,
to
there
tell
was a Grand
myself,
Prix."
I like to tell myself there's a market for it in like 20 years on eBay or something, but we'll see what happens.
I guess in the sense of just encompassing the entire weekend. And a question for my dad today, because I told him that the three of you went to the Grand Prix, and he's like, "What part of it's a two-parter?" So first part is, what part of the overall fan experience at the Canadian GP surprised you the most, and what would you do differently in your overall fan experience if you go to future Canadian Grand Prix, or let's just say when, because it sounds like the time of your life. But we'll start with Erica. What would you say was what part of the overall fan experience surprised you the most, and what would you do differently as part of your overall fan experience going forward?
Wow. Okay. So I'm gonna be totally candid. I basically sat my ass down in the bleachers and then didn't move for like 7 hours. But if I had to pick, I'd say it was the lines. I was really surprised. So like for those who weren't at the race, the Lance Stroll Grandstand, you're kind of like near the end of where everything goes. So it's like near the hairpoint turn, just after. You can't really go anywhere beyond it. There's not really a lot of other kiosks or anything. So the lines were really long, like be it for bathrooms, for drinks, anything of that sort. So when we first showed up, we were kind of buying beers one at a time, but then we learned that Heineken sells them in a 2-4 case at a time. And I just would have bought more 2-4s in a go, honestly. So we weren't constantly getting up and disrupting the sessions, or like doing the same thing, like buy your merch early on Friday, like go to the tents before everyone else shows up. Cause like come Saturday and Sunday, there's just so many more people there. And, sizes start to go, things of that sort. It was just kind of wild to wait around. And like shout out to McLaren for predicting the weather, because they were the only team that had like toques and vests and rain jackets. So on Saturday, when the weather was absolute trash, they were just raking it in because everyone was going to their stand to buy all of this. And people who were wearing like otherwise all Ferrari gear or Red Bull or anything else had McLaren hats and stuff on. So it was pretty entertaining, not gonna lie. And I highly recommend, just kind of planning your day a little bit better so that you get through your lines earlier on before everyone else shows up.
Tyler, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think mine would be similar. I think one thing I would do again is I was thinking about this last week because they sent out on the Monday, for those of you who may not know, but when you buy a ticket pack, you get the first option to buy it for the next year. And so they sent me the renewal email on the Monday, and they gave me, I think it's a month and a half you get to decide before you have sometime mid-July before you have to decide if you want to rebuy for next year's race. So when I got that email, I was reflecting sort of on, okay, if I were to go again, where would I want to sit? And I actually think the location that we were all in the Lance Stroll Grandstand, which, as Erica said, was by the hairpin, is probably where I would want to sit again. The atmosphere was really great. It was also a great location just to be able to see all of the drivers go by. We had some great overtakes that I'm sure we'll get to when we talk about the race, but with Charles coming through the field and George was really aggressive in the hairpin early in the race. So like we saw a lot of action in that corner in the hairpin. And so it's probably one of the better places to watch the race and just the atmosphere in the Lance Stroll Grandstand. It's one of the biggest grandstands on the circuit. So for me, on the positive side, that was one thing that jumped out to me, and I would definitely want to do again if I were to go. I think the only negative that I would raise, or something I would maybe want to do differently, is similar to Erica. Maybe plan out a little bit more how I want to navigate the food, drink situation, because it is a bit of a struggle. You can't just go, between sessions and grab a couple drinks and then, pop down mid, FP3 and come back if you want to top up. That's just not possible. You're going to miss half the session if you do that, right? So a little bit more planning, I think, in order to be able to optimize some of the time at the track and be able to enjoy a couple drinks or food or whatever it may be, I think is something that I would want to do a little bit differently if I were to go again next year, which I'm hoping to do. So
So I'll go next. A couple of things that I noticed is when Tyler and I were out Friday night, we met an individual at a bar, and he said that he's gone to a lot of the Grand Prix. And what he said is in 2019, the rules were much more relaxed compared to what they were in 2021. Like apparently you were allowed to bring beer at the 2019 or 2018 or at other Grand Prix. And this is the first year they finally X'd it. But I think bringing a bag, I saw a lot of people bring coolers throughout the weekend and just like pack their cooler with whatever sandwiches, foods, or whatever. Because like there was a moment where I kind of actually left FP3 early, or I think it was FP3 early or whatever, just to try to quote unquote beat the line, but you couldn't. And I think also I don't think a lot of people anticipated that weather on Saturday, because I think it was a high of 10 degrees. And, I might have worn a couple of layers, but not to the level where you'd be like wearing toques and stuff. And I kind of wish I packed my Ferrari toque. But if you're in Montreal and you think, oh no, if it's going to rain like that, make sure you buy all your stuff before coming to the city. Because I can tell you all the dollar stores, Walmarts or Shoppers or whatever, they're pretty much all sold out. So you're going to be pretty much like stuck in a situation where you're dropping like $150 or $200 on one of those F1 jackets at the track if you don't plan yourself. I would say plan for all season, all weather, because anything can happen. Like it was kind of cool that we were able to experience a dry practice, a wet practice, even a wet qualifying. And maybe my bag could have used a couple more sandwiches too. So beer was $9. And you know what I heard? $9. Okay, whatever. I've heard worse prices. But then it was like the 355 milliliter Heineken cans.
So mad about that. Don't get me started. It's not even a tall boy.
How much were the Souls?
So they did have tall cans of Sol, which is a great beer, by the way. And it was only $10, so $1 more than this small can Heineken. But the problem was everyone knew this, of course, and it ran out in the first hour of each day. So we would get there, we would grab a Sol or two, and then when we went back to get another, they'd be sold out at every single location, to the point where they would just tape over where it used to be. So it didn't even look like they ever sold it. So yeah, like maybe some more planning and some more options on their side. Like I recognize that Heineken sponsors a lot of the Formula One events, and they were the title sponsor of this event with AWS. So it makes sense that there's going to be Heineken everywhere, but Heineken owns other, drink brands as well. So they could offer a little bit more options, and I think that would go a long way in solving some of those issues for sure.
Also want to add, one of the rules were about cameras, and I was reading it and I was kind of confused. Do I bring my GoPro? Do I not bring my GoPro? But then next thing you know, you see people with like $1,000 cameras with like beautiful lenses taking, I'm not trying to call them out, but clearly they were allowed in the stadium with them taking beautiful photos. And I brought my GoPro all weekend, and shout out, you should watch the video. It's a great journey on my YouTube page. But yeah, totally. Like if you have a nice camera, why not bring it and take those beautiful photos if you're especially at the hairpin, because they slow down and then they have to gear up to a DRS zone.
I just love it how like Lance Stroll has a grandstand named after him, and he's done like nothing in Formula One.
Finish him.
Dude, Latifi also had a grandstand, and he's done like nothing. So
Don't chat shit. He's Mr. Consistent, top 16 again this weekend.
you know what? You're right. I can't say anything. I can't say anything.
He waved at me, okay? He waved at me.
I'm from Burlington. Did he actually wave at you, Ricci?
A lot of the drivers waved at me, but I think
in your general vicinity.
I want to thank Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, George Russell, Sir Lewis Hamilton. I think he took a photo of me, but we don't know.
Ooh, Sir Lewis Hamilton. Oh yes, not just Lewis Hamilton.
Nope, Sir Lewis Hamilton. He deserves that.
Honorary member of Brazil.
Yeah. Also calling out some people that told him that he should retire, so they all suck.
Yeah, anyways. Suck it.
You lose.
We'll get into that later, but so Andrew, I think we should probably get into the race now.
I think so. I think that was a great recap. Makes me want to go even more next year now.
Do it.
Oh
Do
yeah,
it.
for sure.
Do it.
Also, before we get into it, like Erica, how great the fact that we were so close to each other. So Livia,
that was hilarious. Purely by coincidence, for those who don't know, Ricci was in section 4 of the grandstand and I was in section 5, and we had no idea until we were like in the bleachers that we were that close to each other. It was like, oh my God.
I
What?
stood up and waved right away. And I saw Erica and it was like literally a 30-second, not even a 30-second walk. It was perfect.
Yeah, it was super easy to get to each other like Friday and Saturday. Sunday was a bit of a different beast, but very fun. Also, for those of you that don't know, like if you ever go to a race, I highly recommend the support races. It was hilarious. We showed up at like 10 a.m. on Sunday and they were racing Nissan Sentras and Micras. Like these are cars that I'm driving past daily on the highway and in downtown Toronto. Micras are these like tiny little compact cars, and these guys are absolutely yeeting them around the track. It was so funny. Like super intense, makes me want to buy one just so that I could potentially race one at a later date in the future. So, you know, live your dreams, folks. Buy that Sentra and enter it in a race. Highly recommend.
Hey guys, it's Ricci here. Just taking a quick break from the podcast to just say thank you to all the fans that we met in Montreal. We really appreciate the support, and this has been our best week in terms of viewership and followers on all of our platforms. So we just want to say big thank you to everybody, whether if it was meeting at the track, on the way to the track, outside the Ritz-Carlton, or at any bar in Montreal. Myself, Erica, Andrew, and our special guest this week, Tyler, really appreciate it. So please hit that subscribe button. We do notice that most of our support comes from people that are not subscribed, so hit that subscribe button so you can be kept up to date to everything that we are doing. So anyways, now we're going to focus now on the actual race. So hope you enjoyed the first part of this week's episode. Now we're going to get into the next part. So without further ado, talk soon. Bye.
I would do say, though, I think the person who had probably the best weekend overall was Tyler, knowing that his boy pulled off his first Canadian GP win, bagged his first pole there and his first W. So congrats to Max on that. It was a really interesting weekend in terms of the race, especially with the Saturday qualifying all in the wet. And Haas pulling off a 5th and 6th with Mick and Magnussen, just to have them kind of completely choke it in the race was really unfortunate to see for Haas fans. But I don't know, like, I guess being there, it must have been a really interesting case to see what the driving was like compared Saturday to Sunday, especially with those wet conditions on Saturday during qualifying.
I guess I'll jump in. I think the most surprise for me was the Aston Martins, because they had a pretty good FP1, FP2, and FP3, reasonable kind of numbers. And then all of a sudden qualifying, they just like, people were shocked in our section. They're like, they went 17th and 18th. They're like, wait, what? And then all
fastest times in FP3 in the wets. And then all of a sudden they changed their pressures for the Q1, and then they just can't get out of it. I'm like, why are you fixing something that's not broken?
And then all of a sudden, Fernando Alonso climbs up to P2, and it's just like, where did you come from?
But that LP has been showing some promise all season. That I think, like, especially with the rain, is the ultimate it neutralizes everybody's. It's based on how well you can handle the conditions, no matter what car you have. And Alonso, with the experience, is really showing that he can just get that car up into a position in the wet where he can score points. And it was really unfortunate to see him on Sunday. I think he suffered from a lot of clipping in his engine, so he couldn't really recover his ERS to help with regards to defending, and that's why he got dropped all the way down to P7 at the end of the day.
I mean, it was super surprising. Like that Alpine, the straight line speed of it was something I wasn't really expecting. Like, as much as we've had DRS zones that go along long straights and stuff, to see that, the Mercedes and the Ferrari and some of the other cars like couldn't catch it on that straight when it was just kind of barreling down was shocking to me, like in a very entertaining way, because it's so fun to see another player that we're not used to seeing at the front of the grid, kind of hold off our main contenders like that. But I mean, and like Ricci said, I mean, it was so surprising to see how some people did in practice and qualifying versus the race. I mean, I don't know if part of it with qualifying was the fact that, at that point it had kind of started raining and we're getting a bit of a dry line here. So, we do know that Aston Martin isn't really as speedy and as pacey when it comes to those dry lines versus the wets, but even still, you kind of expect people to be able to make the most of the situation. and they weren't really able to pull that out in qualifying, whereas some of the other teams were. So it was incredibly entertaining, and I think a lot of people will agree that that lineup of the 20 in quali was not what we were expecting, but super fun to see.
Yeah, and it's really too bad because I really, really, really wanted to see Fernando and Max battle on the front row. And it sounds like that through no fault of his own, like Fernando just wasn't given that opportunity. And I think in the wet, when I think of, some of the greatest drivers, and Andrew, you mentioned it's the ultimate, leveling of the playing field, right? And I think of Max, obviously, is a huge history of being one of the greatest drivers in the wet, like going back to his days in Toro Rosso, and obviously Brazil 2016 is like one of his most famous races when he had that amazing drive in the wet to P3 that was outstanding. And Lewis and Fernando are right up there as well, and we saw that talent live on the track and in the wet quality, so that was really cool to see. But just getting back to that point on the Alpines is, I'm really, really excited to see what happens with them going forward. Apparently, they have a huge upgrade package coming this weekend at Silverstone, and I'm getting a little bit of drinking the Kool-Aid here on the Alpine. I think they have a shot to challenge the Mercs at Silverstone this weekend. So I'm going to be really excited to see if they can. I think it's been very clear over the last few weeks, especially in Baku and in Canada, that they pushed themselves to the front of that midfield. And I think there's no question that, they're the team to beat in the midfield, but can they get into that top three and sort of challenge the Mercs, and start to compete for some more podiums? I think that's in the realm of possibility, which is really exciting. Like, I think, there's been a lot said already this season about, the championship may not be as exciting if Ferrari isn't able to get back into it, and reliability issues and things like that. And, that's a bit of a separate story, because I think that's far from over. But on the midfield battle, I think there's a chance for it to be, extremely exciting. And for Alpine, I think, obviously depends how things go here as we lead up to, a couple busy races before the summer break. But I think they have a chance to really do some damage to Merc in the constructors standings. And for a constructor who only has one team on the grid with Renault engines, I think that's extremely impressive, because especially when you get to new regulations, not only were there new technical regulations on aero this year and a whole new, car, as everyone knows, but the engine regs changed significantly this year. The fuel is now 10% ethanol. There are huge changes to the engines. And when you only have one team to be able to do some of those tests and look at data, it's a lot harder to develop your engine mid-season. And so I think, the progress we've seen from Alpine over the last couple of weeks has been pretty incredible. And I'm pretty excited to see, how that kind of bears out over the next couple of races, especially if they have some room in their budget cap and they're still going to bring some major upgrades. I think they got a shot to catch Mercedes, and I think that's going to be really exciting to watch.
And it goes really well too for Alpine going forward, with having such a strong engine too, because I think that's really a big important thing for getting Piastri to be on, for him to go to Williams next year, just as part of the deal with having to go to Renault engines from Mercedes for Williams. I think it just goes to show that they have that kind of talking point, that leverage point now that they can use to say, hey, you got to go use our engines as well, going forward, and showing that it does work. But as Tyler mentioned, going back to Ferrari, I think you got to be, John can verify this for me, but I think from an outsider viewpoint on Ferrari, that you have to be optimistic after this weekend, because even though you are taking big penalties and engine penalties, and I'm talking like really early in the season, like having to go through 4 engines through like 9 races is not good by any stretch of the imagination. So of course, Riley's got to work there, but when you see like Carlos battling out Max there for for the race win there at the end, which was really frustrating to watch, considering he just couldn't get it together for 15 laps to like overtake him. But to watch like Charles climb through the field on, from 19th to P5 on a track that, yeah, you can overtake, but it's still very narrow, right? It's almost kind of like Monaco in that sense, or it has that feel of Monaco where it's very tough to overtake, with it being, narrow and a lot of turns. Going forward, I think you have to be really optimistic going into Silverstone, where Charles did, lead a lot of the race there last year. I just unfortunately got nipped by Hamilton at the end. But what are your thoughts, Johnny, on Ferrari going forward?
Oh, the Tifosi was wild this weekend when we saw some incredible racing. Oh, and especially when the safety car came out, I'm like, this is it. he puts on the mediums, he's able to catch him, or maybe does he take the risk with the softs? But man, on the Ferrari on the straightaway against the Red Bull, it was he needed more time in order to do that. But it clearly shows that like we're much better we're much better if we're doing like turns or kind of crossing over than on a straightaway on a Red Bull. But it was a good weekend nonetheless, because we saw what happened in Baku, and a lot of the Ferrari engine cars were not doing very well. And, we saw both the Alfa Romeos make the points this weekend. Incredible drive by Guangqi Zhou. But also like Leclerc to go from P19 to P5 and, had to take the engine penalty. That I also was wondering why he was not going ahead and qualifying 3, or I think it was, but made total sense. There's no point of risk it. But yeah, there's some optimism. I mean, Silverstone is a legendary track. It's going to be I think it's going to be a marathon in particular for the Ferrari engine. So I'll be interested to see how it goes. But I could tell you, every Ferrari fan was just hoping that Carlos Sainz was able to catch Max Verstappen, or maybe do that pass. Like this would have been if it was any races so far, this was going to be Carlos's chance to maybe get his first win. I think he's slowly getting up there of the most podiums or something like that without a win.
He's 3 away from breaking the record. He just passed Roman Grosjean for 4th all time most podiums without a win with 11. The record is 14. So he's getting close.
That's absurd.
And just also want to add that, I missed the Leclerc. I was recording throughout the race, but then I got to a point throughout the race where I was like, I'm going to put my phones down. I'm going to put down the GoPro. I was like, I need to focus. And like, Erica, you weren't seeing this, but our friends, shout out to Andrea, Grade, and Matt, who were with us, and my dad, me and Tyler were just stressed. That last 20 laps after the safety car, just stressed. But I really hope Carlos can at least get a win this year. I think that will definitely really push his momentum. But like, nevertheless, this was a good race for him. But also, I need to say, shout out to Mercedes. Looking nice.
Honestly.
Looking nice. Toto in a regular t-shirt. Looking nice.
It was.
Oh, sorry, Garrick, go ahead. My apologies.
No, I was gonna say, like, I think Carlos deserves his win at this point. Like, I mean, I know we were all tossing around some jokes and stuff earlier in the season about how he locks up anytime he even sees gravel or anything like that. But that was some nice racing this weekend. Of course, I think like Tyler and Ricci will agree there were some good lunges on his point where he was really trying to push it going into that hairpin there. He wanted to make the most of it. Yeah, he locked up on the brakes, and I'm sure that lost him some time or like any advantage that would have helped him move forward for the last few. But the guy wants it. He's going for it. He's hungry, and I want him to get that first place podium so badly this season.
And especially at this point, and especially in a situation where Sergio Perez's gearbox goes down, like that, this is an opportunity where you're only two Ferraris are racing one Red Bull. Like I could easily see Leclerc was starting to catch up on George Russell, and if there was more time in the race, like there could have been a chance that Leclerc could have even gone even higher where he was. But
I think if also if Ferrari hadn't shunted that one pit that he had and they'd done a better job, he may have been able to make up a little bit more time. But
I just want to say I think everyone did terrible on pit. I think it was like, whether if it was, with all due respect, I think it was like there was an area within Montreal where everyone was trying to become a pit driver, or they're doing the simulator. So you'd hold the gun and then someone hold the tire. I feel like they actually took some fans and then brought them to the track and just said, okay, you guys are doing the pit stop actually this time, because a lot of the teams, their pit stops did not look good this weekend.
Well, one team in particular had a really bad pit stop that kind of cost them some points. And I'm not going to name names out here, but it starts with an M and it rhymes with Laren.
Finish him.
So,
okay,
do you want to talk about this? Because Danny
Mercedes?
Rick was actually having a really good weekend until that double stack that went horrifically wrong.
I was so hopeful. Like, Danny Rick was doing all right. Lando was looking like he was making some moves, probably going to get into the points. And then they just didn't have tires there. Kind of hard to make a pit stop when you don't have tires, right? And I was just sitting there looking at the board and I was like, why is this happening? Why is this a thing that we're doing? Honestly, I don't understand. And at that point, I mean, like, they called them both in. It wasn't like a Monaco like we saw with Ferrari where it was kind of a mishap and then they were trying to send Shaw back out again. But like, it was just Lando, like Daniel went and got his tires and took off, and it wasn't the best pit stop of all time, but like not something to turn your nose up at. And then Lando pulls up and there's no tires and he's just sitting and sitting and sitting. And I'm sitting there like, someone get some hustle in your bustle and just move. Like, I don't care if you have to like drop kick them across the garage at that point, just get them into the hands of these guys and put them all in the car so he gets back out. But like, they're like, I don't understand. I mean, like earlier in the season, I commented on how all of the pit stops seem really slow compared to what we were doing before. We talked about how, you know, new tire size and the temperature that they have to be out could have played a factor in that. But at this stage of the game, like we're so many races into the season, you should have your stuff figured out and you should be able to pull out those 2.5 to 2 second pit stops, no problem, especially if you're a team like McLaren that's got a well-performing pit crew in the past and was setting the standard earlier in the season. So sad weekend for me. Got some compliments on my sweater because people thought it looked fancy, but that's about the highest point of the weekend as a McLaren fan.
I just wanna-
your mishaps, your mishap in the pit stop allowed Aston Martin to get a point through Stroll today through the race in pizza.
Shout out to the Lance Stroll
Lance
hats.
Stroll.
The Lance Stroll hats were fire.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm happy that one Canuck at least scored points on his home GP. Latifi unfortunately did not, as we all know, but Mr. Consistent, top 16, as we were saying earlier on.
It's all the way up, Andrew. But no, it was actually really cool because on Sunday, we everybody was wearing these green hats, and we were kind of like, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, if you sit in the Lance Stroll section, you were allowed to get this like green hat." So it was kind of cool that you got to go scan your ticket, and we were nervous. We're like, "Oh my goodness, are we not going to get it? They're like, "No, we have enough. Just you're good." So sorry, but no, I think it was good, and I think Aston Martin really needed kind of a little pick me up. Obviously, it was like a difficult qualifying for them, and you know, at least a point to point. It's obviously not a lot, but hopefully it gives them some momentum to go into to Silverstone next weekend.
I'll take it. It's really frustrating when you do so well in the FP1, FP2, FP3 kind of side of the weekend, and then all of a sudden qualifying comes around. You don't even make out a Q1, and you're just already starting on the back foot, and you're just scrapping for a point at that point, and it's really frustrating because it's like you see a promising car in free practice, yet when it comes to qualifying, they're just not being consistent there. But I think like the big thing, and Tyler, you can quote me you can say if I'm wrong here, but what was the key in the victory this week for Max was his consistency in the chicanes and in the turns. I felt Carlos had some troubles being consistent in terms of his exits. It really kind of put him far behind, I think, in terms of the DRS training. Like that's why he wasn't able to catch up. And you can see how clinical Max was in that race win because he was able to keep him back about 0.6, 0.7 seconds at a time.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And especially this weekend where for the first time all season, the Ferrari actually had a slight top speed advantage in the straights. And we hadn't seen that all year. The Red Bull has been an absolute bullet in the straights, and especially with DRS. And the fact that Ferrari had a bit of a straight line speed advantage and Max was able to keep him behind even with DRS is pretty impressive, because in those last 15, 20 laps, he's in a position where he can't afford even one mistake. You have to nail every exit. You can't afford to lock up the tires going into the hairpin. You can't afford to overdrive the car or push too hard, like we saw with, no offense, Ricci, a Charles Leclerc and Imola, where you try to push it just a little bit too hard going through the chicane. But we didn't see any of that from Max this weekend, and it really was a masterclass, especially, you know, given he wasn't able to communicate with the pit wall for the last half of the race. He could hear them, but they weren't able to hear him. So, you know, just a really mature champion drive from Max this weekend. It was really cool to see. And yeah, too bad for Carlos. I mean, other than a couple mistakes here and there, he had one, obviously, that big lockup on the last lap at the hairpin, but otherwise he also drove a great race this weekend. It was just, you know, Max, to your point, Andrew, was Mr. Consistency, didn't make one mistake all season, and Red Bull nailed the strategy. So credit to them as well.
I think Max, he was the best in FP1, FP2, FP3 he lost to Alonso, but then the race qualifying just absolutely killed it. And Carlos said that he needed if he got it at least to 500ths of a second, he was potentially able to do it. But I was not nervous of that lockup. You put it, you try to do whatever you can, and the minute I saw the white smoke, and actually one of the cool things is when you see the drivers kind of go to that Lance for that hairpin, and you can see drivers when they know they're screwing up, you see that white smoke immediately building, and just we saw a lot of that, especially, and it was actually really cool when you saw the drivers come during the wet practice and just seeing all the water fly everywhere. Mind you, they're only doing 240 kilometers. Only.
Just 240.
Not 340 or whatever it is. So.
It was I thought the funniest moment of the race for me though was when Yuki absolutely bended into turn one after getting the tires put on, trying to heat him up. So funny that F1 dropped like a video this past week in terms of was it like top 10 pit stops problems or something like that. So he literally kickstarted a video for their social page. On that
poor Yuki.
Liked by Pierre Gasly.
Apparently he was wearing a shirt in Paris that said "Like by Pierre Gasly," so we're gonna have to get a copy of that shirt.
Legend.
Anything else stand out this weekend? I mean, well, not this weekend, but the Canadian Grand Prix.
I just have.
Go ahead,
sorry.
Erica.
Go ahead.
No, you go first.
All right. So the one thing that stood out to me, like as much as you can see a difference in the cars and you hear a bit of a difference in the cars in a broadcast, even though, so I was in row O, which is like a decent way up the grandstand, but even still, like we all know that these cars and these constructors have taken different approaches to the aerodynamics of the new car this year. And some people have side pods, their side pods are different sizes. Just, everyone's using different engines, things of that sort. The differences between them are so much more apparent in person than they are on a camera when you're seeing them coming around a track. Like that Haas is so wide, even compared to like I saw it coming around the turn and I was like I always thought the Ferrari was big, and then you see that and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a blue whale that's just someone's plunked down on the track by comparison. And then that Mercedes with like no side pods to it is the like slimmest, most like benign looking car on the track. Like they were absolute menaces this week, which was fantastic to see. But when you see how everyone else took it, it's just so drastic a comparison. And like you kind of understand the differences and why certain cars are performing a little bit better when you can see it in person in that extent, which you can't see, in like a quick little camera clip or between all the edits that they make on like a Sky News stream or something like that. So I thought that was fantastic to see. I think my friends wanted me to shut up and stop talking about it at a certain point because I kept commenting on it. And they were like, Erica, we're just here to have beers and have a good time. And I was like, no, but if you look at the Williams and but just super fun weekend. I think we were all sitting in like a fantastic spot if you want to see some cool racing go down. Super curious what it was like around like turn 3 around the Latifi grandstand, because you can kind of see some of the stuff coming off the start. But it was a great race. I think everyone did their darndest, and I'm excited to see what's happening at Silverstone next week.
I think big shout out though should go to Alfa Romeo. For me, they're like one of the best, I think, constructors of the week in that sense, in terms of Guan Yu Zhou was, finally given a car with no technical issues, and he was able to
finally
overcome the curse. I know, right? It's just Q3 for him, which was great to see. And I think this was his first race in Canada. I'm not too sure. But one of his first races overall, I would say, maybe in all competitions, but he did some awesome overtaking on Sunday during the race to get into the points for sure. And then kudos to Valtteri for forcing Alonso into a penalty with his hard racing styles, and that was able to get, I think Alonso finished P9 at the end of the day, which then boosted up Alfa Romeo to 2 spots as well. So kudos to that overall team. And to me, they're the team of the the biggest surprise of the year so far, just based on how they've been able to grow that car.
Yeah, and 2 new drivers too, right? So to go from last year where it felt like they were nowhere on every race weekend with Kimi and Giovinazzi, to bring in 2 new drivers, Valtteri obviously being the leader there with all of his experience, and to be able to develop the car to this point with the new regs and to nail them, relatively speaking, for a midfield team is pretty cool to see. I think they're definitely one of the constructors of the season, absolutely, this far.
I think they brought in hungrier drivers this season too, with Kimi kind of just going out the door with his retirement and bringing in with bringing in Bottas, who's got a point to prove, right? He was the number 2 for 5 years in a row. He wants to start being the number 1. And I rate Joe over Giovinazzi any day of the week, in my opinion. I think he's just more technically sound and he's just more hungry in that car.
And he, there's a story this week. I know we're kind of cutting short to time, but he almost quit F1. Because he was tired of being number 2 to Lewis, but we can talk about that at the summer break when we assess everybody's performance for the halfway part. So, I think it was a great weekend overall, and I really appreciate it. Tyler, thank you for getting the tickets. We loved every second of it. I can't believe I won't lie. I did get emotional. FP1 when you start to see the cars and the music was playing, like when you actually hear the F1 theme song and I was like, beats any club drop song or whatever in the club, like that is it. So okay, but I'm kind of getting Texas galore here. So anyways, thank you guys for listening to this week's episode, and really appreciate all the new fans that we met in Montreal this weekend, whether if you were at the track, on the street, or waiting outside the Ritz Carlton, hoping to see any of the fans. My name is Ricci, Andrew, and Erica, and special shout out to Tyler. Sorry, I'll take it seriously. To Tyler, thank you so much for coming on the pod this weekend. We'd love to have you again. And Andrew, please send us off.
Tyler, thank you so much for joining this week's podcast. You were an absolute treat as a guest co-host, and I look forward to doing more than with you in the future. Tyler, I think we might have your social pages out there just to say, give them a follow and see so you can see your experience of F1. I imagine you have pictures and whatnot as well to share with some fans if they're interested. But with regards to the F1 podcast, again, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like us on or follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on Ricci's YouTube page. Don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel and his Twitch. Until next time, we are in Silverstone at the home of British motor racing on Canada Day weekend and Independence Day weekend, no less. Should be a doozy. Hopefully got another lap 1 cracker, but make sure it's not Max.
It's called racing, Toto.
It's going to be called racing, but hopefully no one goes into the wall.
I don't have a habit of checking my email during races.